This is Nick.
This is Jack.
It's Thursday, the new Friday, October 17th. And today's pod is the best one yet. This is a TBOY.
The top 3 pop business news stories you need to know today.
Oh, Jack, goodbye to your car. I'm sad to see her go, man.
After 3 years, we just returned our Volkswagen electric car to the dealership.
Although you did name her Yeti, and I always thought that was really cool. Yeah.
Yeti, she did us well.
In the meantime, Jack, we got 3 fantastic stories for today's show. What do we got on the TBOY, man?
For our first story, one college tutor startup just hit a shocking $500 million valuation.
Because this startup will get you into Harvard for $200,000.
For our second story, it's Louis Vuitton. Their fashion sales shrank for the first time since the pandemic.
LVMH is the perfect case study on tariffs because for every tit, there is a painful tariff tat.
And our third and final story is Butterfinger. They just broke the greatest streak in food history.
After 101 years, Butterfinger is launching their first new flavor.
And we think it's a huge mistake.
Huge mistake. Huge mistake.
But Yetis, before we hit that wonderful mix of stories.
No one else is doing this mix. Love the mix today, Jack. Great mix.
Have you ever been walking your dog in the morning and thought to yourself,
hey, I wish my puppy and I could be wearing matching shoes. You know, I wish.
I did that this morning with Remy.
You did? Oh, did you really?
Well, great news. Now we can, because Crocs just launched dog shoes.
We repeat, Crocs is expanding from human feet into pet feet.
Pet feet, they're called paws.
Okay, paws, feet, whatever. Either way, you can now wear the same clogs as your dogs.
The same gibbets as your Jack Russell Terrier.
The same soles as your St. Bernard.
Hey, Jimmy Choo, Crocs is coming for your Shih Tzu.
Now, the reason Crocs is doing this is because pet spending, it has doubled in just the last decade.
Because puppy.
P-U-P-P-Y.
People ultimately prioritize puppies.
In fact, Americans spent $150 billion on pets last year, which is nearly double what we spent on shoes.
We repeat, we spend nearly twice as much on pets as we do on our own paws.
But the biggest question here for the Crocs new dog shoe is the price.
Because dogs have 4 feet, humans only have 2 feet.
So that's why dog clogs are going to be more expensive than human clogs.
True story. Dog clogs, they're $5 more than a typical men's pair.
You got to get twice as many for your little Pooski over there. Oh, and by the way, they also glow in the dark for some reason.
Your move, Uggs. Your move.
P-U-P-P-Y. Jack, let's hit our 3 stories.
15 years before this song, 2 boys from the Northeast met in the dorm. They had an idea that caused a cultural storm. It's the best one yet, but the best is the norm. Jack, Nick, that's it. I don't even think they need to practice. 50%, that's a fat tip. TBOY City on your list. If you know, you know, cause we ready to go. We can't wait no more, so just start the show. Start the show.
For our first story, one college tutoring startup says they're 98% sure they can get you accepted to your top #1 school.
And venture capitalists just valued this tutoring business at $500 million.
$500 million. But Yetis, let's start our story like this. Every month, 11-year-old kids fly across the world to New York City to visit a tutor.
Not just a tutor, the tutor.
A college tutor. And that tutor is an outrageously educated 29-year-old from New Zealand.
Jamie Beaton is a founder of a company called Crimson Education Consulting, and we've never heard about someone so well educated.
Oh, no, we have not. His business, he cracked the code on getting you into an Ivy League school. Harvard? Yeah, no problem. You got this.
He knows how to get into Harvard because he's done it. In fact, he applied to 25 schools when he was 18 years old and got into all 25 of them.
Jack, could you whip up the resume on this one, please?
He went to Harvard for his bachelor's degree. Then he got master's degrees from Stanford and Penn. Then he got a PhD at Oxford while also getting a JD from Yale.
And running this college startup the entire time.
I think he's like Hermione. He's got that like time shifting machine that lets him be in 2 places at one time.
Well, now he has hired former admissions officers from all of those schools to consult applicants on getting in to all of those schools.
Jamie Beaton is known as the Steve Jobs of college consulting.
And he has the first tutor business we've ever seen that is venture-backed and as big as it is. Jack, let's jump in TBOY style.
He's raised $75 million from the VC community, which values the company at $500 million.
This college consulting startup has 26 offices in 21 countries, and they've acquired 5 different competitors.
And what's the cost to be a customer of this college consulting business?
Jack, it's up to $200,000, which is why this startup is generating $200 million in revenue every single year.
I am overwhelmed by the academia of this story so far.
We'll start taking notes, Jack, because there's a test at the end. Yetis, that was all wild. But the wildest part about this company is actually the results.
Because Crimson students now make up 2% of all Ivy League freshman year admissions.
We repeat, whether you're at Brown, Penn, Cornell, Harvard, 1 out of every 50 Ivy League kids are graduates of this program.
That's a huge number. So Nick, how is Crimson winning the Ivy admissions game?
What is the code they have cracked? Well, Jack, the first part of the formula is this.
Jamie Beaton told the Wall Street Journal in an interview that if you want to get into an Ivy League school, you must have 10 activities you do connected to 2 central themes.
And one of those themes should have a social justice component. That's key.
All right, that's part 1. Part 2 of the getting into Ivy's formula, you must have 2 forms of leadership.
One must be institutional,
Like be the captain of a sports team.
and one must be entrepreneurial.
Like you started a newsletter side hustle while you were in high school.
Now, those are the first 2 parts of the formula. The rest is a secret. You got to pay $200,000 to actually get.
But the underlying advice from this company is that you should only pursue things in high school if you can be the best at those things.
Yeah, it's like little Jimmy. It's great that you love pottery, but unless you can win like the pottery championships, then you're going to have to give up pottery. I'm sorry, son.
Yeah, you're wasting your time. It's actually the same advice as Ricky Bobby got from his dad.
Good point, Jack.
If you ain't first, you're last, apparently.
So besties, add it all up, and as you can imagine, this article was the #1 most shared piece on the Wall Street Journal all of yesterday.
Because it's controversial. Not just because that Ricky Bobby advice about being first or not being anything.
Also a good point, Jack, because it highlights that if you got $200,000, you can buy your kid a fast pass into the Ivy Leagues.
How do you say that in Latin? Harvard.
Well, except Dartmouth, because Dartmouth will take anyone these days. So, Jack, what's the takeaway for our buddies? Just kidding. Over.
We're going to get some beat green hate mail today, Nick.
Everywhere.
The most fundamental rule of economics is scarcity.
Yetis, the fundamental rule of economics underlies everything in our world. And that idea is that resources are scarce.
Because there's a limited amount of the things we want, the forces of supply and demand dictate who gets it.
Well, for example, in the last 30 years, the number of students applying to Ivy League schools is up 400%.
That's the demand side.
But in the same time, the number of slots has barely budged at these schools. So the admissions rate has fallen by the same proportion down to just 5%.
That's the supply side.
So the way we see it, the emergence of a $500 million college consulting startup, it reflects the underlying rule of economics.
The more scarce the resource, the more intense the market.
For our second story, LVMH's luxury fashion business just shrank for the first time since the pandemic.
The reason? Tariffs. Because for every tariff tit, there's a painful tat.
Now, Jack, I don't want to bring you back down memory lane to your trip to, France, but last time we covered LVMH, I believe it was the Paris Olympics.
I was basking in Aperol spritzes all week, man.
You were living your best life over in the arrondissement, whatever.
I was. Well, during those Paris games, LVMH was basically the event planner of the whole thing.
France's most valuable company was determined to make Paris the most fashionable Olympics ever.
But that $160 million investment in Olympics marketing by LVMH, it did not pay off.
No, it did not. Louis Vuitton's house of luxury brands just announced that revenue shrank 2% last quarter.
Get off the podium.
Get off the podium. Their stock is now off 15% from its high that was set just 2 weeks ago.
Erasing $60 billion of stock market value, that was not on their list of this fall's seasonal goals.
Pour out the Moet, unpop the Hennessy. Paris Fashion Week is canceled. That was dramatic.
That was so dramatic.
LV, you still look fantastic. Keep doing what you're doing. But the reason sales actually fell at LVMH, it's got nothing to do with LVMH.
To quote Robin Williams, it's not your fault.
Okay, so Jack, let's sprinkle on some context to this fascinating situation.
Sales in China make up 20% of LVMH's business.
Newly minted Chinese billionaires, they want status symbols like, a nice little LV logo on anything.
Like the $87,000 foosball table with the Louis Vuitton logo? That's a real product, Yetis.
Real thing, we found it. But here's the funny thing, Yetis. This summer, a trade war began between China and the European Union.
To protect the European car makers from unfair competition coming from China, the EU passed 45% tariffs on Chinese-made EVs.
And Jack, what did China do when the European Union did that?
They retaliated.
Yes, they did.
With targeted tariffs where it hurts the most.
Okay, here's what they did. First, to inflict pain on German car companies, China is now taxing German-made cars.
Next, to inflict pain on LVMH, China is now taxing French brandy.
As the LVMH CFO said in their earnings yesterday, Louis Vuitton has become collateral damage to the electric car trade war.
Those are her words. And the result? LVMH's sales in Asia fell by 16% last quarter.
Sit down, stand up, and put the bag away.
LVMH's biggest market is shrinking because LVMH has become a target in the trade war.
And no amount of $87,000 Louis Vuitton foosball tables can get them out of it right now. So, Jack, what's the takeaway for our buddies over at LVMUY Hennessy?
For every tariff tit, there is a painful tat.
Yetis, on Tuesday, Trump said that tariffs were, quote, the most beautiful word in the dictionary.
Tariffs are taxes on the stuff that we import from abroad. And Trump thinks that tariffs as high as 50% will force factories abroad to relocate to the United States.
But the interesting thing about this LVMH story is that it shows how for every tit, there is a painful tariff tat.
For example, if we tax Chinese-made solar panels, China is going to tax American-made airplanes and agriculture.
And that's why economists think a tariff-loaded trade war would be a double whammy of bad news for America.
Tariffs would result in higher prices for us consumers, because we'd have to pay taxes on the foreign stuff that we import.
And it would lead to a recession because our exports would suffer from retaliatory tariffs.
Trump thinks the economists are wrong, but LVMH's recent earnings show it.
For every tariff tit, there's also a painful tariff tat. Hey Yetis, if you're a bestie, take a sec and hit that subscribe button.
And like this video while you're at it. If you leave a comment, by the way, we'll read it.
For our third and final story, Butterfinger just made its biggest move in a century. Their first new flavor.
Butterfinger changed the recipe, and we think that's a huge mistake.
Now, Yetis, as a couple of guys who used to work in finance, we like to keep track of great financial streaks.
Johnson & Johnson, they've issued a dividend every quarter for 60 years.
Domino's Pizza enjoyed 113 straight quarters of sales growth.
How about this one?
Butterfinger.
That candy bar hasn't launched a new flavor in 101 years.
Unchanged in over a century. Yeti's the Butterfinger. It is peanuts, it is wafer, and it is all covered in chocolate.
It's like a sophisticated Reese's.
It's like a Reese's that studied abroad but came back and learned more.
And they've had the same single flavor. No varieties beyond that one flavor since before The Simpsons.
Yeah, the Butterfinger. It is actually a top 10 U.S. candy. $200 million in sales, growing 12% a year since Nestle sold the company to Ferrero.
But here's the news. For the first time in their 101-year history, they're introducing a new flavor. Caramel Butterfingers.
Caramel. Same inside, but instead of a chocolate-covered outside, it is caramel-covered.
It's a limited time only, and it'll only be permanent if it sells well.
Now we know what you candy snobs are going to point out. Butterfinger has changed their shape in the past.
Heart-shaped Butterfingers for Valentine's Day. Bunny-shaped Butterfingers for Easter.
But despite those changes in shape, Butterfinger has never introduced a new flavor or ingredient, and that is the key.
And we all remember Bart Simpson's Butterfinger BBs.
What Jack and I are saying is someone has now laid a finger on that Butterfinger.
Bart's gonna kill somebody.
He's not happy about the caramel. But Yetis, when Jack and I heard this wild hero stat about this 101-year streak of not changing the flavor, we had to jump in TBOY style.
And we learned that Butterfinger was an early candy disruptor.
Get this, Yetis. But Butterfinger was invented in 1923 in Chicago by the Curtis Candy Company.
Brutal name. So they actually employed a stunt to rename the candy bar.
From the first time that we've ever seen, fans would write letters to what to rename this candy company, and then they voted on a new name.
The Curtis Candy Company crowdsourced a new name and came up with Butterfinger.
And Jack, did you see why they came up with the name Butterfinger?
I assume someone suggested it and fans voted for it.
It was actually a new term used in baseball for players who would drop the ball. They were called Chicago White Sox Butterfingers.
Interesting.
But besties, the founders of Butterfinger didn't stop there, did they, Jack?
They also pulled off one of the first airdrops to ever happen, like an epic airplane stunt with Butterfingers.
Yeah, they hired airplanes across 40 different American cities and literally dropped Butterfingers from the air on top of like unsuspecting citizens.
What an incredible marketing stunt. We actually found proof of this stunt in a newspaper article from 1926.
This is 100 years before Red Bull ever did a floof walking or whatever that thing's called.
Fluke talk.
Exactly. But Yetis, 101 years later, Butterfinger finally has a new flavor.
We love caramel, but we hate this idea.
So, Jack, what's the takeaway for our buddies over at Butterfinger?
Butterfinger is giving up a competitive advantage. Timelessness.
Yetis, Jack and I have said before to focus on being different, not on being better, because different is better.
Well, there are plenty of caramel and chocolate candies out there, but none of them had Butterfinger's record.
Butterfinger's streak of no new flavors in 101 years? That was a major marketing opportunity. That's what they should have done.
No other candy has gone so long without introducing a new variety. Not even M&M's.
The Hershey's Kiss? Pfft, they were doing vanilla versions like 3 years after they launched.
Instead of a caramel Butterfinger, Butterfinger could have focused their brand on their differentiator, their unique streak of not changing.
Butterfinger, the only candy so good we haven't changed the flavor in over a century.
If that was on the label, I'd be more likely to buy one.
Jack, caramel Butterfingers, they're
Intriguing.
but being the only unchanged candy in over a century?
More intriguing.
Jack, could you whip up the takeaways for us for the new Friday?
Crimson College Consulting is worth $500 million because their grads make up 2% of the Ivy League.
And that reflects the fundamental rule of economics. The more scarce the resource, the more intense the market.
For our second story, it's LVMH. Their earnings suffered from the electric car trade war. Sales to China fell by 16%.
As Louis Vuitton has taught us, for every tariff tit, there is a painful tariff tat.
And our third and final story is Butterfinger. They're offering their first new variety in 101 years, Caramel Butterfinger.
But Butterfinger, in doing so, you have given up a key competitive advantage: timelessness.
Bart Simpson is pissed. But Yetis, this pod's not over yet. Here's what else you need to know today.
First, Signet, the owner of the Kay, Zales, and Jared jewelry chains, just announced a brand new diamond marketing campaign.
Here it is. Worth the wait. That's how they're promoting natural diamonds in the face of lab-grown diamonds.
And Jack, who happens to be behind Signet's new diamond slogan?
De Beers, the international diamond empire.
So Yetis, if you want to hear about lab-grown versus natural diamonds, or your boyfriend is just dragging his feet these days, check out our episode from yesterday. You're going to love it.
Second, we've got another nuclear power update. Amazon is investing $500 million in a bunch of mini nuclear facilities.
Which is just a week after Microsoft also made a deal to get nuclear energy.
Big tech is betting on AI, and AI needs a ton of energy.
Oh, and nuclear delivers a ton of energy.
Carbon-free energy. So prepare to see more tech-funded nukes across America.
And finally, the Las Vegas Sphere is about to get a sibling. We're getting a second sphere, and it's coming to
Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi. Yeah.
The Middle East will be the home to the second giant entertainment sphere.
Interestingly, the government of the United Arab Emirates will pay to build the sphere and pay a fee to the sphere company for the rights to operate the sphere.
So you can finally say, I saw OAR at the sphere in the UAE.
There was a lot of air conditioning. Now, time for the best fact yet. This one sent in by Jonathan Marson from lovely New Jersey.
The Tampa Bay Rays baseball team had its stadium roof torn off during Hurricane Milton last week.
And according to Major League Baseball, the Rays will not have that stadium ready to start next season, which is 6 months away.
So the Tampa Bay Rays are looking for another city to host their baseball team temporarily.
Like a temporary city. Like they could become the Montreal Rays for next season.
Or they could be the Nashville Rays for a day or a week.
Or Jack and I were thinking, what if they became the Puerto Rico Rays, which works so well? I mean, they got so many Puerto Rican players.
The old San Juan Rays.
I mean, Jack, I would buy that hat. I would buy that hat.
I would buy that hat too, man.
We would buy that hat.
We hope they fix the stadium soon, but it's an exciting opportunity for a city that's always wanted to host a baseball team.
Yetis, you look fantastic for the new Friday. And remember, if you would buy Crocs for your dogs, then bark twice. We're listening. Bark twice.
Bark, Nick. I've already done it. Maybe now I should clarify. This is Jack. I own stock of Crocs.
And besties, the best way you can help grow this show, TBOY, is to drop down and give us 5 stars and a review. We love reading them.
We love every review, and we love you. That's why we're bringing the best one yet tomorrow, too.
Bark, bark. If you know, you know. And before we go, a happy birthday to Yeti Steven Shapiro, turning 26 in Philadelphia. Also celebrating 1 year as a senior software engineer at Twilio and just bought his first home.
Happy 56th birthday to Joe Malero in Lugoff, South Carolina. This long-haired and hardworking dad is quite a husband, too.
And a naughty Jane down the street in San Francisco is going on a date, an all-day date around SF with her boyfriend. Guys, enjoy the Presidio, check out the Marina Green. You got to stop by the Ferry Building. Any other things, Jack?
What's the acai place in the marina we used to go to?
Oh, it's Planet Earth. It's fantastic.
Pro tip, toppings on the bottom.
Very bold of you, Jack. I know what actually happened when you did that. I was there.
It actually didn't end well.
Enjoy the city, guys. You're going to have a great time. And Alex Burns Asak over in Lincoln, Massachusetts is celebrating a birthday just outside Boston. And a shout out to Matt Frankie in St. Paul, Minnesota, who heard our story yesterday on the Tokyo subway, but he thinks the Santiago, Chile subway is the best subway on earth.
The best one yet, if you will.
And Pauline Law over in the state of Vermont, Jack has got an update for you.
Okay, so I was walking to the pod studio yesterday, and I found your ski pass. So it's valid for this coming season. DM us at TBOY Pod, and I'll find a way to get it back to you.
Once you get it back, celebrate the wins.
This is Jack. I own stock of Crocs and Amazon.